My name's Ted Harbach, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm alive and sober tonight by the very special grace of a loving God, the loving program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'd like to thank Bonnie and Gary for inviting me to come. At least I think I want to thank them. Getting up at 4 o'clock this morning and spending some 6 hours on airplanes and flying through hail, sleet, and snow, and to get here for that dinner. I don't know if Al-Anons are thrifty or just cheap. Of course, it is a departure from their normal fare. Pressed chicken. Then they checked me into the hotel, and I did something that I do occasionally just to humor myself, and I kind of hung back, and looked ineffective, and sure enough, Bonnie just rose right to the bait. Right up to the desk. I'm here, and Ted Harbach is registered, and we're here to check him in. I'm just going, oh. God, it was just neat, Then they left. I checked into my room, and there was somebody already occupying it. So I walked in, checked the whole room out. It was some guy. So I went down and got a different room. And then on the way out, I got to visit my basket of fruit that you all had sent over. It's at the check-in desk. Hasn't gotten up to the room yet, but I said hi to it as I walked by there. And then they gave me this name tag. Talk about an extravaganza. My God. It's like a bloody Christmas tree. Then the next thing that happens is, as if it's not bad enough checking me into the room with some other guy, why they give me a male bear. And I'm single now. And so I complained about that bitterly and whimpered a little, and Mimi finally took pity on me, and we traded bears. And I thought everything was going along pretty well about that time until the entertainer, Ron, kissed me on his way off the stage. I did find out finally how that quilt was put together, though. I mean, they try to put the story over on you. What happened, I understand, is that the Al-Anon sponsors got together and sentenced all their babies to do that on cold winter nights while they're supposed to not have an emotional involvement in their first year. My sponsor told me not to have an emotional involvement the first year and to stick close to the program, and his girlfriend had 14 years. I just tell my guys, just go for it. Get the pain over right now, man. Then we'll have some concrete evidence to work on, Token AA speaker, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know why Al-Anons invite me to speak, really. Kind of masochists, I guess. And all I do is just report on my findings, and none of it's very original. In fact, Gary was sharing with me just a little while ago. I think Al-Anon is probably the most diabolically horrible thing that has ever happened to an alcoholic. And Gary was sharing, how he got that final phone call to come home for the last time. Gary, come home. Your clothes are killing the grass. I got to Alcoholics Anonymous because of a sideways Al-Anon. I had this old drinking buddy, Fat Fran. Fran weighs 280 pounds, and she's my kind of drinker, man, I'll tell you. Fran has never made the program. I talked to her, and I just love this lady. And she's one of the most talented ladies that I know. She studied with Frank Lloyd Wright at Taliesin, and is probably she's just a great designer. And she's never been able to make Alcoholics Anonymous. And the last time I talked to her was about 2 months ago, and she's been drinking worse and worse all the years that I've been on Alcoholics Anonymous. And just to let you know that I'm a little beyond a newcomer, my sobriety date is April Fool's Day, which is a good day for me, of 1968. And I was dating another alcoholic who was also a terminally untreated Al-Anon. And they're really dangerous. I'm looking for one now. You know, the kind that just lets you be God. Everything was fine until she got sober. Anyway, she used to call Fran, because I drank with Fran a lot, because like I say, she was my kind of drinker. In fact, Fran took me to my first AA meeting. It was at the old sheriff's station in Malibu, and she called me one night and she says, "Let's go get blasted." And I said, "No," I said, "I got to do something about my drinking. It's just getting completely out of control." What was happening was I couldn't remember where I worked. And so she said, "Oh, great." She says, "I've been to A&A and it's just terrific. And tonight they're having a meeting at Malibu, and there are kind of people up there, whatever that is." I found out they're all lower companions, just like me. I didn't know what a lower companion was until I became one. And in those days, like I say, it was at the sheriff's station, and I knew that I'd made a cardinal error the minute I got in her car, because she was already drunk. And she was driving a convertible, and we hit the first turn out of Beverly Hills on Sunset and went into a four-wheel drift. And then we hit the stop signal at Beverly Glen, another big, huge four-wheel drift, and quartering into the stop signal. And a quart of vodka rolled out from under the front seat, and I knew I was going to be okay. And by the time we got to the AA meeting, we were ready. The only problem was that the meeting was on Saturday night, and this happened to be Friday night. The sheriffs were so excited to see us, they wanted to keep us until meeting time. We convinced them that we'd walked. So I missed my first AA meeting, but I really had a hell of a good time, what I can remember about it. I'm an alcoholic of the caliber that's pretty well described in the big book. I drank for effect. All my life up until I was about 16, when I felt like an alien on a foreign planet and nobody had given me the brochure. And I would have sacrificed my life to keep you from finding out what a terrified little wimp lived inside this body. And I damn near made it. I went just as far as you can go on the runaway freight train of alcoholism. Then I went one step further, like I usually do with everything. But something happened to me when I drank alcohol that I've never heard described by a social drinker. In fact, I don't think social drinkers should be allowed to drink. And Al-Anon's drinking pattern is as baffling to me as mine is to them. I mean, my God, I had a secretary for a long time that was I can hardly say it, social drinker. I'm always amused at that part of Chapter 3 of our big book, which states that medical science has not yet found a way to turn drinkers of our type into normal drinkers. I suspect they're talking about social drinkers. I'm really looking forward to the day when medical science will announce they developed a pill to turn me into a social drinker. And then I'm going to think, though, if one pill will make me social... I'll tell you what, Doc, can you give me a prescription for a six-pack? Let's get really social, you know. I had a secretary, and I used to take her to lunch all the time. Every once in a while, she'd get this glassy look in her face, like she's going to have a spiritual awakening, and she'd say, "You know, I feel like a glass of wine." And I'd say, "Why?" "I always felt like one." And she'd say, oh, don't start that again. And I'd say, seriously, one day I'm going to do an academic paper on the thought process that an otherwise seemingly normal human being goes through to arrive at the conclusion that one of anything's worth a damn, let alone one glass of wine. And then she'd sit there and drink half of it. I could just see it evaporating. I'd say, my God, why don't you drink the rest of it? And she'd just look at me demurely and she'd say, oh, my dear, no, if I did, I might get dizzy. No kidding, I'll tell you what, we'll fill it with about 16 ounces there, just slam it back, you'll go right through dizzy to fun. I mean, it's great. And just as it starts to do what it's designed to do, they quit. And then they go out and drive, give us a terrible name. We have an incredible dilemma facing us in Alcoholics Anonymous that I'm preparing the groups for, and before which I speak. They've now reduced the blood alcohol content, at least in California, to 0.08 for drunk driving. Are you kidding? They're going to be sentencing social drinkers to AA. You think you hear a lot of crap from these podiums of Alcoholics Anonymous now? Wait till you get to those people. One of those crapheads is going to stand up and say, oh, I just had a half a glass of wine and my whole life became unmanageable. I got a court card and was sentenced to one whole meeting of AA. And I made a decision that night to never drink again. And they won't. See, all I know is when I drank alcohol, some grand things happened to me. All of a sudden, all the terror was ripped out. And that God hole in my gut with the wind blowing through it kind of healed over. And that ice cube with 18 million corners kind of began to thaw out. And that cloud of impending doom began to dissipate. And all of a sudden, I could go anywhere I wanted to go and be anybody I wanted to be and do anything I wanted to do. And I'd move over into that land that Dennis Waitley talks about, the land of someday someday I'll get it together. Someday I'll have a meaningful relationship. But over there in that land of someday I'll, in that chameleon-like people-pleasing mode the alcoholic finds himself in, living my life for your expectations, real or imagined. Over there I could do the one thing I wanted to do all my life. I could just step out easy. Just step out easy. And all the world was soft and round and firm, and all the sharp edges and the rough corners fell off of it, and you people made sense. And I could do all of that stuff. I could have a race car on the track when I was 16 behind a forged birth certificate. I could be a member of the Mount Baldy Ski Patrol at 18. I could climb into those chairlifts and those gondolas with terminal acrophobia with no fear at all because I invented the drinking man ski pole. Each one will hold a fifth of Ron Rico 157 purple label rum. Now I got to tell you, that'll make the difference between a hero and a coward. And you're not afraid. Behind alcohol, I learned how to fly airplanes when I was 16 years old. I liked to fly biplanes off the old Culver City Airport. We used to pretend like we were repairing the fabric on the top wings before we'd get ready to fly. And what we were doing is changing the numbers. And right off the end of the runway, just roll them over on their back and fly upside down. Look better that way. Go right over the old Ocean Park Pier, about 4 feet over the sign that said, "Don't stand up on the roller coaster." They got the message of why they weren't supposed to stand up. Then we'd slide right and go up over Surfers Beach in Malibu, 3 feet off the deck. I don't know if you've ever seen 150 surfers wipe out on one wave. Under the boards, boys, here they come. I learned how to be a deep-sea diver as one of the first scuba divers on the coast. Underwater diving's terrifying unless you know how to dive and be heroic. The way you do that is you put a dish of pure grain alcohol right in front of the intake manifold of the compressor. That way you can bubble the air right through it and fill that tank with 50% alcohol vapor under 2,000 pounds per square inch pressure. You can put the mouthpiece in your face and breathe that stuff and get euphoria of the deep but never get wet. Then you get down about 100 feet and you see one of those great big groupers or one of those big, huge sea bass. They got a great smile. They have a terrific personality. Hi, fella. You know? You think you have gills, he's breathing, you know. Pull the mouthpiece out. Here, have a blast of that, big fella. Here, have another blast. Go jog somewhere. Behind that alcohol, I could do all of that stuff. I was one of the youngest subdividers in Southern California. At the age of 24, I was building over 200 houses a year. And already I was into the terminal progressive disease of alcoholism. And already I was up to the 4 or 5 martini lunch. And already I was having withdrawal at lunchtime. And I knew that if I didn't go to lunch, well, I'd fly apart in a million pieces. And I didn't know that if I didn't go and have a drink at noon, that I might go into an alcoholic withdrawal. And in that withdrawal, I might go into an alcoholic seizure. And I did not know that in that seizure, I might shatter my spine in 6 places like one of my best friends. And I did not know that in that seizure, I might very well die of the terminal progressive disease of alcoholism unless I had a drink. And it wouldn't matter if I had known, because my book tells me that knowledge is no defense against taking the first drink. And I just had to run out my string. I just had to run out my string. I remember going to another meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous early on, and in those days, why, they were in the same places that Al-Anon meetings are now, basements. And nobody paid the light bill, and you were all lined up around the room, and you were all old. Jesus, some of you were 40. And your life was obviously over, you know. And then there's this universal broad that seems to speak at almost every alcoholic's first meeting. She just goes around the whole world doing this, you know. She's got a weird name, like Phoebe or something. And she's the original anorexic, right? I didn't know she was there for a long time. She was turned sideways. And finally, she turned around, and I thought, my heavens, that'd be like making love to a gunny sack full of antlers. She had false teeth, too. Looked like she could eat corn through a barbed wire fence, you know. What is this? And then she tells you those magic words that are just guaranteed to shoot you through with hope. If you want what we have. I thought, God, honey, if you got anything, hang on to it. What's a stepper like me doing in a dead-end outfit like that? And then one of those smarmy old-timers gets in your face, the ones that know all the answers. I just asked him what I considered to be a reasonably intelligent academic question. I expected a reasonable answer. I said, tell me, old man. He was 40. I said, what is this A&A all about anyway? And they always put their finger in your chest. And they always start just the same. Well, Sonny. Oh, Jesus. What it's all about is you just don't drink. Oh, wow. That sounds like fun. That's it, you just don't drink. Just say no, huh? Why? The only time that I ever said no thank you to a drink was when I misunderstood the question. He says, yes, you just don't drink no matter what, even if your ass falls off. I said, wait a minute. Time out. I said, first of all, you old fool, you don't even know what an alcoholic is, see, because an alcoholic drinks no matter what. And if you're an academic and a planner such as I am, you usually drink about 2 weeks before your ass falls off. Because I don't want to be embarrassed. Stroking down the street, you know, all of a sudden some Al-Anon says, hey, Ted, your ass fell off. Oh, no kidding. Bring it along, honey. I might want to sit on it later. Oh, okay. Yes, God. He says, yes. And he says, and you just remember, Sonny, it's the first drink that gets you drunk. I said, what are you whacked out on? First drink never got me drunk. Are you kidding? What kind of a piker are you? A guy like you shouldn't drink. I said, I know exactly what drink it is that gets me drunk. It's the second to the last one. Well, he says, if you just feel like drinking and the madness is on, you have to think the whole drink through. Now, there's a piece of advice. That really works, huh? You think a whole drink through? What? You mean one of those thimblefuls? I might think a whole case of Magnums through, you know. But I never thought about one drink in my whole entire life. I mean, just get it in, slam it back, let's get on with it. Think the whole drink. What kind of nonsense is this? So, well, when the animal comes back alive, call me. I said, yeah, I'm really going to call you. I'm into fat old men. I said, I want to tell you what comes time for me to drink, I call a broad. I don't know about you. Well, Sonny, and he keeps the stuff up, you know. Just remember, easy does it. What? Easy never did nothing. Well, he says, it's one day at a time, is what it is. I said, your brains are scrambled. Living on the edge like I live, I may make it 1 nanosecond or 2. A whole day? Not a chance. No way. Well, he says, it's just live and let live. I said, well, you just fired your last cannon on that shot. I said, you get that finger out of my chest or your life's over. I said, but tell me this, old man. If you take away my alcohol, what are you going to give me that'll rip out the terror? What are you going to give me that'll heal up that God hole with the wind blowing through it if you take away my alcohol? What are you going to give me that's going to melt that ice cube and dissipate that cloud of doom? What are you going to give me, old man, if you take away my alcohol that's going to allow me to do the one thing I wanted to do all my life? What are you going to give me? It's going to allow me to just step out easy. And he couldn't tell me, because he couldn't tell me about you. But more important, he couldn't tell me about him. All he could repeat were all these hackneyed cliches that he'd heard. And that's a lot of the crap that I hear from the podiums and from, quote, sponsors today. Well, just don't drink and read the book and go to the meetings and screw you. Right? What are you going to give me? And when the madness hits and the honeymoon's over after the first blush of sobriety, if you're an alcoholic of my caliber, you better, by God, have the spiritual armor that's promised in a magic book called Alcoholics Anonymous to protect you. Because if you don't, the book promises that you will drink. Because it says in the big book, there will come a time in the life of every alcoholic where there will be no mental defense against taking the first drink. That's when all of this real expensive intelligence that's disseminated in these spin-dry units just goes right out the window. Because it won't keep you sober. It won't keep you sober. There is only one thing that will keep an alcoholic sober, and that's the spiritual armor that is the result of taking a few gentle, loving, God-given steps in a magic deal called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had to run out my string. And I began going with a gal later on that we were old drinking buddies for about 6 years. And one night she called Fat Fran and she said, Francis, where's Teddy? Fran says, listen, you crazy bitch. Don't you know that he's an alcoholic and that you're killing him? And if you want to save him, you better get your ass to Al-Anon. And she went. Screwed the whole thing up. And then one night, not too long after that, I came out of my last alcoholic blackout, and I was in St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica in the intensive care unit. And my doctor was looking down at me, and he was crying. I said, why are you crying, Doc? They're so intense. And he says, because, damn you, you've killed yourself. Impress me. You know. So what? See, death would have been a welcome alternative to the kind of life I'd become accustomed to living the last 2 or 3 years of my drinking. And I know all about death. I've sat down and talked to him 6 times right across the table in my life, just like I'm talking to you now. Death holds no fear for me, because I know what that deal's about. And he said, well, be more specific. He says, well, you have alcoholic gastritis, cirrhosis of the liver, hemorrhagic pancreatitis. You have 2 ulcers that are hemorrhaging. You're bleeding from every opening in your body. Your blood pressure is 60/40. That's serene. He said, we push 7 pints of your blood type. The bank's empty, and that's the end of that tune. And besides, I said, oh, is there more? He said, yes, if you don't promise me you'll never drink again as long as you live, I won't even treat you. I promise. 10 days later, I was back out in the street and I was drunk again. He told me I had not to do that anymore. I came off that last drunk crawling around the unfinished concrete basement of an old beat-up house hanging on the side of a cliff in Silver Lake, just northwest of downtown Los Angeles, living like an animal. And I just pried my head loose from some blood on the floor, and in my hour of direst need, I cried out to the God of my childhood, and He heard me. And I remember it went something like this. See, I remembered another man that had carried the message. See, all these deals are a real big deal, and being a speaker's a big deal, and being a chairperson, that's a big deal, and being the secretary of a meeting and a treasurer and all of this stuff. But I want to tell you what the biggest deal in the world is. The biggest deal in the world is 3 o'clock in the morning when you hold another person in your arms and let them cry, and you love them home. Just like this deal started, one alcoholic talking to another, or one Al-Anon, or one Al-Anon. And I hope that never stops. And I remembered this man in that madness of insanity that I was in the middle of. And he said something like this. He said, Ted, he said, I don't believe that you've reached a bottom, either physically, mentally, morally, emotionally, socially, financially, or spiritually, beneath which you cannot go so that you can satisfy the admonition laid down in chapter 3, which says, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we're alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. Clear back in chapter 3. That morning, lying on that floor, I was totally bankrupt in all categories. Physically, mentally, morally, emotionally, socially, financially, and spiritually. Everything was broken. Broken businesses, broken promises, broken dreams, broken marriages, broken bank accounts, broken laws, broken cars, broken houses, a broken mind, a broken body, and a broken soul. And I was ready. And I remembered what he said. He said one day when you reach this bottom, he said, I pray to God you can remember a magic place where you can come. Where he said, I absolutely promise you, you can find a way to live your life comfortably with unsolved problems, without ever having to drink again as long as you live. And where you will end up meeting people that'll end up meaning more to you than the members of your very own family. Because when the heat's on and the hammer's down, you need these. They're dark the night, they're going to be there. And they're going to be there just for you. They're going to be there for only one reason. Because they care. With unconditional love and uncritical acceptance in a magic place called Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, and in this magic place, he said, I absolutely promise you, you can find a God of your very own that you can take with you wherever you go, so you need never be alone again as long as you live. And I said, yeah, but tell me, if you take away my alcohol, what are you going to give me? And he turned to a page in a magic book called Alcoholics Anonymous. It's in a vision for you, the last chapter. And it's in the beginning pages. And the question is asked, do you have an adequate substitute? And the answer's there. Yes. Yes, we have an adequate substitute. Something that gave me everything that I had found in alcohol, I have found in a magic deal called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm not talking about finding it in 12 promises, because if you think there's 12 promises in the book, once again, somebody shortchanged you. Somebody shortchanged you, because in my magic book there's over 160 promises. And they've all come true for me. They've all come true. 160 promises. My God, what a deal. And I almost missed it. And so I came back to a little park on Roxbury in Beverly Hills where I grew up and used to play as a kid. And that's where I found those old-timers to walk the walk of Alcoholics Anonymous. See, it's easy to do podium talk. I don't pay much attention to what people say. But I watch how they walk, see. I watch how they treat themselves and how they treat the things that belong to them. I watch how they treat their loved ones. I watch how they treat their animals. And I'll know more about that person than listening to them the rest of my life. And I saw them going through all of the things that it takes to go through life. I saw them going through the loss of loved ones, the loss of businesses, the loss of health. I saw them gaining new businesses and developing beautiful relationships and becoming successful. And a magic deal called Alcoholics Anonymous. But what I really saw was that they were doing the one thing I'd wanted to do all my life. They were just stepping out easy. But they were doing it without taking any mind-altering chemicals or drinking any alcohol of any kind. And somehow in the madness of insanity that was to be mine for a long, long time, I wanted what they had. And I came back. And a year after I came to the program, I married that little gal that I used to drink with. And she likes to call herself a double winner because she's been on the program of Al-Anon for 22 years. And she's sober 2 weeks longer than I am, and it was hard being married to a living legend. But the greatest tragedy and sadness in my life is she never got the program. She just never got it. And as the years went by, it got harder and harder because nothing I could do was any good anymore. And what I heard coming into the relationship was my mother. And you can't do anything good for Mom. You sure as hell can't jump in bed with her. And she drove me away with the criticism and the inventory taking until I couldn't stand it any longer. I had to leave. It took 8 years for me to make up my mind. But that's what the Serenity prayer is really all about, isn't it? God grant me the pain of going through whatever I have to go through so that I will then know beyond a shadow of a doubt what I can change, so that I can pray for the courage to change that thing. Or to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is beyond my capability to change, so I can pray for the serenity to accept it. And so the Serenity prayer is a prayer for pain. And about 2 months ago, I separated from her about 4 years ago. And my little daughter's 18 years old now, and she's living in San Diego, and she's just a little beauty. And we have a relationship that's just incredible. And some of you have heard my tape where I talk about taking her flying and taking her skiing. And she wanted a car for her 18th birthday, and she wanted a little Volkswagen, and she'd never driven a stick shift car. And her mom's giving her all this untreated Al-Anon bullshit. It's a shame. It's just a shame, I want to tell you. And Monica said, what am I going to do? And I said, well, see, I know one thing beyond a shadow of a doubt. I cannot teach anybody anything that I'm emotionally involved with, because if I try to do that, I'm going to put expectations on them, and the expectations are going to be unsatisfied, and then I'm going to get angry, because I wasn't born angry. I was born in a rage. I don't know anything about being firm either. Being assertive. I just go right from firm to combative. There isn't any middle of the road for me, see. So I made a decision. I said, well, I tell you what, why don't we both go out and learn how to drive a clutch drive car? I said, after all, I'm only 4 years older than you are. You got to remember that. See, that's the deal we've had ever since she was little. I've always told her that. I'm only 4 years older than you, honey. I don't know anything about doing, Dad. We're going to have to figure this stuff out. She'd look at me one morning. She'd say, where are you going all dressed up, Dad? And I said, I don't know. Got my adult clothes on. I guess I'm going to go out and try and act grown up. She'd just laugh. Because, see, she knows it's the truth. So I put myself back when my dad was trying to teach me how to drive a damn stick shift car, you know. And he's getting all academic and trying to explain it, and he's getting frantic and tearing out his hair, and I don't have enough left to tear out. And so I said, now, here's what's going to happen. Now, I got this little Honda Civic or something, and I said, now here's what's going to happen. And we're off on a side street, and she's still in her graduation gown from high school, right? And we sent the untreated one home there. And so where are you going? I gave her the same answers that I gave everybody when I was drinking. Nowhere. What are you going to do? Nothing. Then they ask you, who were you with? Nobody. Why were you so late? I don't remember. You know, they're standing in their spot there when you get in, you know. You need to smoke. Because when they say that, where have you been? Why, you need to take a cigarette out and light it up, and then you take a drag. You let the smoke out slowly, and you say, were you talking to me? By then, they've forgotten the damn question. And if you're a new Al-Anon, why, don't worry about all those lines in your face. Those are not laugh lines. Nothing is that funny. Those are Venetian blind marks. And they will go away. So I got out in this little Honda, and I said, now, honey, here's the first thing that's going to happen. First of all, you're going to let the clutch out, and you're not going to give it any gas. You're going to jackrabbit down the street and just make everybody crazy. And we started doing that. You know, I just let the clutch out. Blah, 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 blah. She starts to laugh, because she always laughs at me anyway. We have a hell of a time. And then I said, now, the next thing you do, you get overcompensatory. You see, you give it a whole bunch of gas and let the clutch out real fast, and then it just lays off rubber, you know, and screams down the street, makes everybody crazier, you know. And we did that a little bit, you know. Now you get to try it and have some fun. She said, what if I do all that? I said, that'd be great. I'm only 4 years older than you. I'll give a damn. Crack it up into a damn telephone pole if you want to. In 20 minutes, she was driving professionally a clutch-driven car for the first time, because I set her free. I didn't put any expectations on it, and I didn't make any criticism at all. And that's the kind of relationship that I learned with her. I hate to admit this, but through Al-Anon. And we have a beautiful relationship. And through the years, why, all of those promises have come true for me. And the program is so simple. Today I look at the program just like a great big fun slide with a loop at the bottom. And I make a promise to everybody when I speak, and I say this. I say, if you're having trouble with the program, call me, because I can move you from step 1 into step 9 in one day. And if you don't believe me, call me. But I only get one call from each meeting, and that's all I need, because I'm working with 2 newcomers all the time, every day, going through the steps. But it's just that fast, see. The end of chapter 5 that you hear read at every meeting, when it says, being convinced, we were at step 3, that's the end of 1 and 2. Say the prayer with somebody, grab their hand, get on your knees and do that deal. And then at the end of step 3, why Bill tells us exactly when to take the step, how to take the step, why to take the step. It gives a bunch of promises after each one. Right after step 3 it says, though our decision was a vital and necessary one, which means it's rather important, it would have little lasting effect, which is kind of 0, unless followed at once by a searching and fearless moral inventory. By moral inventory, Bill means honest. If you go back to step 3 and where it says, made a decision to turn our will and our life over, if you substitute thinking and actions, it becomes a lot easier. Because if my thinking can become God-directed, then my actions will be God-directed. My actions are my life, and that's the end of that tune. And it gets a lot easier if you really understand. You sit down, you just make a list of everybody you're angry at, a list of everything you're afraid of, and a list of everybody you've harmed, sexually or otherwise. Sometimes this is when small farm animals get into the inventory. Next door neighbor kids, and mom and dad sometimes get back in there. See, because it's designed to handle all the ACA issues and the CODA issues. See, out there in West Hollywood, where I come from, they got a meeting for everybody, for God's sake. Got one we call Alaqueen. They got a new one out there for pre-Alateens. It's called Alablame. Got one for people who can't stop talking, too. Al-Anon and on and on and on. After you made the 3 lists, you just go back and write a couple of sentences about each one, and that's the end of that. Then you find some huckleberry to share it with, and hopefully they've read the book. Otherwise, you read it to them, and they say, oh, that's just wonderful. Now burn it. It was so brave of you. Which is unfortunate, because a few pages later it says, referring to our list, which you've now burned. And I want to tell you where this whole deal begins. Where this whole deal begins is on page 75. People ask me, when does the obsession leave? When does the fear leave? How do you get the spiritual side of this thing? Page 75. There's 10 promises on page 75. Now, we can't get there by turning to it in the book, though. See, because it's sandwiched in between step 5 and 6, exactly like what it is. A gift from God, and there's only 2 things you can do with it. Take it and be eternally grateful, or throw it away. If you throw it away, don't waste my time. On page 75, after you've shared your inventory, why it says, come home and take the book off the shelf and review the steps we've taken so far. For we are building an arch through which we'll walk a free person. Free to do the things that I have to do because I want to do them. On page 75 it says, if the obsession to drink or whatever, our program is being used in 250 disciplines today. 68 of them have written permission from our general service. Now, I don't care what the problem is, plug it in. If the obsession has not been removed prior to this point, we will feel it leaving us now. It says all fears will fall away. You believe that? And you won't know that till someday you screw up the courage to take the risk to do the one thing that absolutely terrified you and find out. Fear is removed. On page 75 it says, though we may have had certain religious beliefs prior to this point, we will now begin to have a spiritual experience. We will sense the nearness of our Creator. We will feel as if we were walking on the broad highway, hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. You'll have brushed the face of God. You will have established a conscious contact with a power greater than yourself. All right there on page 75 and 6 more promises. My God, what a gift. I believe, in my opinion, it's the greatest gift that God has given to man in over 2,000 years. I almost missed it. Now you're left with step 6, and that takes a lot of study. It's one sentence long. Become willing to ask Him. And then you gotta move ponderously into step 7, and that's so complicated, it's one sentence long. Ask Him. And the slide's really getting going fast now, and you've already made some of the amends to maybe your mom or your dad or your kids or whatever. You're in step 9 already, and less than a day has passed, and that's how fast it goes. Because remember, it's never perfect, and it's never finished. It's a lifelong project. And all I want you to do is get started. When I made a decision to get my pilot's license again, I just went to the airport and turned my will and my life over to a guy called a pilot instructor. And you know what he said? Let's go flying. I said, well, don't you think I ought to go to a book study group for about 10 years on artificial horizon and compass? He says, keep the blue side up and it points north. Trust me. Let's go flying. And I made a decision that most people in Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon make a decision to get their pilot's license and want to spend the rest of their life in ground school. Let's go flying. Because you ain't going to be up there 10,000 feet without a co-pilot if I'm your sponsor. You're going to be right on the ground. If you got a problem, call me. You only just need one tool, a phone, and your mouth working. Except I do a disastrous thing to the people that I sponsor. I say, oh, really? Let me ask you, do you have this written down? Oh, no. Well, write it and call me back. And those hour-long conversations just get compressed into about 1 minute. And they're doing step 4. They may not know it. And they're doing step 5. And they may not know it. And I don't give a damn because they're doing it. And we're going flying. I set them free. I don't make cripples. I don't make cripples. Set them free. Then it wraps up into step 10 and you're into the big loop because step 10 says continue to take personal inventory, which is 4, 5, 6, and 7 every night. That's what the book says. Every day. And when we're wrong, promptly admitted it, steps 8 and 9. And so in step 10, I have the magic formula for happiness, which is keeping current with my feelings on a daily basis. And if you do that, you will be happy. You won't understand that you're happy, because we're used to either high elation or suicidal depression. So happiness and serenity, it just feels to us like nothing's going on. If you find yourself in that position, go slam your arm in the door. And then you'll know that a few minutes ago you were okay. And then it slides up into step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve the conscious contact that you made somewhere back there between step 5 and 6 when you brushed the face of God. Praying only for His will, His thinking for us, and the power to carry that out. So we're powerless in the beginning and we get it all back in the end in a different form. Our life's unmanageable in the beginning, but I got it all back in the end because the book tells me I got a new manager. And one of the greatest promises comes true because it says that I will come to that point where I'll neither regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it because I will find that my experiences can benefit another. And all the negatives turn into positive, and all the bad stuff turns into good stuff. And all the guilt, shame, and remorse is gone from the past, and all the fear is gone from the future. For guilt is only in the past, and fear is only in the future. With the fear gone from the future, I can journey there with my hopes and ambitions and goals and aims with no fear. And if I choose to journey into the past, it's without guilt or remorse. Only happy memories, because that's what's promised. And so what I'm left with is what Winnie was talking about earlier. I'm able to live in the now, in the one place I always wanted to be, with you. And then it sweeps down into step 12, having had a spiritual awakening, which is defined in the appendix simply as a personality change sufficient to recover from the disease of alcoholism. We tried to carry this message. What message? The message of how our personality changed through the application of some gentle, God-given loving steps. Carry this message to the alcoholic and practice these principles in our daily affair and the loop is closed. What principles? The principles of continuing to take personal inventory, step 10 every night. Seeking through prayer and meditation, step 11. Every morning it says upon awakening and during the day when we need it. and carrying the message of how our personality is continuing to change as we grow in a spiritual program called Alcoholics Anonymous. If you do these things, particularly if you're an Al-Anon, why, one day maybe you'll be able to give the advice that old John Carlton from Brownwood, Texas, told me about. He had a little black belt Al-Anon living next to him and next door to him, and her husband was a former professional ball player, and he weighed about 300 pounds, and she wasn't any more than 100 pounds sopping wet. And John says one night her husband came home, and he put away a couple of cannons before he hit the front door, and the argument started in the living room and spilled over in the family room there, and finally ended up in the kitchen. And finally this old guy says, well, I can't stand it anymore, I'm going to kill myself. And so he went into the bathroom. He had one of those old-style bathrooms with a live gas heater, and he blew the pilot light out on the heater and turned the gas on, filled the tub up with water, and got in the tub. And his little wife didn't hear much from him there for a while. Finally, she knocked on the door, and she said, George, what are you doing in there? He said, well, I'm killing myself. I've turned the gas on, and I'm into the water up to my neck. And she said, well, if that's the case, I wish you'd put some towels in the crack under the door, because the gas is making the cat sick. The only problem we have is a couple of the research things that have come out where they found that alcoholics have 2 or more distinct personalities, and Al-Anons have 1 or less. But as long as you understand the enemy here, if you're an alcoholic, see, like the difference between a terrorist and an Al-Anon is that you can negotiate with a terrorist. And in deep sea diving, I found out the difference between a killer white shark and an Al-Anon, too. The killer shark circles before it attacks. So regardless of whether you're new or old or happy or suicidal, you're Al-Anon or alcoholic, I'll leave you with 3 prayers that they gave me when I came in. First one says, please pray God just keep coming back and listening to the music until you can understand the words. Listen to the music of alcoholics, maybe for the first time, be able to laugh at themselves. The healing laughter and the unconditional love and uncritical acceptance of Alcoholics Anonymous that I've seen help put back together broken and shattered human beings that no human power could ever put back together. The magic program of Al-Anon that I've seen help put back together broken and shattered families that had never had a chance if it wasn't for Al-Anon. And I must never forget the first meeting of Al-Anon that I went to. The little guy was standing up there, and he had his arm up in an airplane splint with a stainless steel strut running from the elbow to the pelvis. And he was standing up in front of about 75 of his friends, and he was telling them about how his daddy loved him and how he loved his daddy. Now he understood that his daddy had a disease called alcoholism. Now he understood that his daddy didn't mean it when he lifted him over his head and hurled him into the fireplace and shattered his collarbone. If a program can give a kid that kind of power, it's got to be a magic deal. So keep coming back and listening to the music. The second one, just put your hand in ours and come with us, see, because we've been there and we know the way. And it'll be okay. God, don't let go. Just hang on real tight, because if you let go, we're going to lose you. And we don't want to lose anybody, not if we can help it. And the third prayer, the really tough one, please pray, God, just let us love you until you can learn to love yourself. And one day, maybe if you keep doing that, and get a sponsor, and take these gentle, loving steps, you'll be standing in front of a mirror, and all of a sudden, maybe you'll hear yourself whisper quietly, just to yourself, I love you. And it'll move the longest distance known to mankind, from the head to the heart, from academic to experiential, and you will realize that you are sober, happy, joyous, and free, physically, mentally, morally, emotionally, socially, financially, and spiritually. One of God's kids, like it was in the beginning, before it all got broken and shattered somewhere along the way. And all of a sudden, you will know that you have found your way, and the heavens will be gentle. Thank you.